Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and esteemed colleagues, well, let me say thank you for staying back. I thought the numbers will be dwindling further. Thank you very much. And let me say also, you are the lucky ones. As the saying goes, the best is always saved for the last. Okay? Ladies and gentlemen, my name is L.S. Leonard. I'm the Chief Legal Counsel at MCMC. I'll be the moderator of today's segment, the last segment of the day. Yeah? And I must say, it's a privilege to have all of you here as we explore one of the most critical and transformative topic of our times, the evolving landscape of online regulation and its impact on our society. Ladies and gentlemen, as we know, today we live in this cyber world, digital era, and so many other names they call our era. And everything is fast-paced. You receive an email today, you are expected to reply within 5-10 minutes. You receive a WhatsApp message, the next minute you must reply. That's the expectation today. Okay? So we can say technology has redefined our lives, how we communicate, how we access information, and how we even protect the public. So this session today aims to address the challenges and opportunities faced by regulators as they strive to create framework to ensure public safety, public confidence, and at the same time, maintaining its support to innovation. Our discussion today will focus on three core themes. One is balancing technological progress with the need for safe and secure online environment. Second is addressing the challenges of managing broader societal impact of online platforms. And third, developing resilient regulatory framework for the purposes of cybersecurity and to safeguard critical infrastructure. And through this dialogue, we aim to uncover adaptable, collaborative, and forward-thinking strategies to promote public trust while enabling the continuous innovation in digital space. And to guide us through this interesting topic today, we are privileged to have three distinguished panelists, each bringing unique expertise and perspectives to today's discussion. Next to me, we have Ms. Devi Annamalai. Ms. Devi serves as the head of Regulatory Policy Division at Malaysian Communication and Multimedia Commission. Seated next to Ms. Devi is Ms. Madiha Mahmud. Ms. Madiha is the Chief Executive Officer of Communications and Multimedia Content Forum of Malaysia, CMCF. And next to Ms. Madiha is our panelist number 3, Mr. Siraj Jalil. Mr. Siraj serves as a council member of the Consumer Forum Malaysia, CFM, and is also the president of Malaysia Cyber Consumer Association, MCCA. It's not only consumer, cyber consumer. Okay. Now we have set the stage for the conversation today. Let's dive into the heart of the matter. I'd like to pose a broader question to all our panelists today to set the stage. This is what I've come up with. Panelists, how can adaptable, collaborative, and inclusive regulatory frameworks be developed to safeguard public interests while simultaneously enabling technological progress in digital age? Ms. Devi, please do us the honors of taking this first question.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Leonard. First of all, good afternoon. Is it a good evening to all the audience? Yeah, thanks for staying back for the last session of the day. I was actually expecting the room to be emptier, but okay, there's still enough crowd for the evening session. Yeah. So, as mentioned, I'm the head of the policy division in regulatory policy division in MCMC. So, as you know, recently we actually came out with a licensing framework for the online service providers, which I'm sure most of you have heard about. Okay, so when you talk about having an adaptive or or a legislative framework that is adaptable, I would say for us, we are fortunate enough that we have this piece of legislation called the Communications and Multimedia Communication and Multimedia Act 1998. If you look at the CMA in itself, I would say even though it was enacted in 1998, it's a very much a very innovative piece of legislation, okay? And it was actually crafted at a time where it's like looking into the future, right? So the way the law was crafted to be future-proof, one, and secondly, it also was crafted to be technology neutral. Because of these elements, when we wanted to regulate, say, the online service providers, right, we did not have to come out with a new piece of legislation. We could actually leverage on the existing CMA, and we can actually use the existing framework to actually bring this group of online service or digital platform providers into our regulatory ambit. Right? So to me, what is important is that when we are crafting legislations from the onset, the legislation must be flexible enough. As much as possible, it should be technology neutral for us to adapt as we go along when we're looking at the technological progress in the country. Right? So that's one. So I think we were fortunate that we had a very innovative piece of legislation that we could actually utilize. Second, I think as a regulator, especially when we are coming out with a regulatory instrument, what's very important is we have to make sure that we are very much consultative or collaborative in our approach, right? So it should not be something like top-down. I think it's important for us to engage with our whoever the relevant stakeholders in that ecosystem. That could be your service providers, it could be your consumer groups, it could be even public which has a significant interest in that matter. Yeah. So I think the other one that I think we should adopt would be a collaborative approach. And the third element that I would look into is also about being inclusive. So whenever we do a piece of legislation, it should be inclusive for all the relevant people. For example, when we talk about online service providers being regulated, what was important for us is that, first of all, of course, it should be something that can, protect or safeguard the interests of the public at large. But at the same time, there are a lot of pockets of communities within that public that needs protection. This could be your children, right? These are like the vulnerable group that would need additional protection as opposed to the normal public at large. Mm-hmm. So to me, it has to be, the legislation has to be robust enough. Second, there should be an element of collaboration. And thirdly, we should have an element of inclusivity.
Mm-hmm. I see. If I understood Ms. Devi's point correctly, any regulatory framework must be flexible enough, must be future-proof, must be technology neutral to ensure that it serves its function to regulate, at the same time ensures innovation is safeguarded as well. Have I understood you correctly, Ms. Devi? And I can't agree more. The CMA, an act which was enacted in 1998, has served us well till now. So its very existence, it's living proof that when a regulation is technology neutral and future-proof, it can sustain to safeguard the industry. Okay, now Ms. Media, what's your view on this? The same question.
Okay, thank you, Leonard. I think I'll be joining the rest of the panel on the CMA 98 fan club. I can show you, if you could show the first slide, just to give you another indication of how CMA 98 was very progressive for its time, how the lawmakers in 1998 was very much forward-thinking of it. If I can have the slide up, please. Yeah. Is there a slide?
Ms. Media's slide, please.
Where am I looking? Okay, so essentially what this slide would show you is another element in the Communications and Multimedia Act that's not my slide. Madiha here, CMCF, slide 1. Okay, so the point that is to be made in the slide that should be up there soon is in the Communications and Multimedia Act, it also looked at how this collaborative, consultative, inclusive form of regulation should be made with multi-stakeholder approaches. So if you look at the slide up here, we have MCMC, which is the regulatory body, which is the commission, which looks at licensing and regulating. But in the Communications and Multimedia Act, there's also Section 212 that says the commission can designate an industry body. And the Content Forum is that industry body that looks at self-regulation of content. Now, self-regulation can get a little bit of a bad name because if you think about it as, just let you do whatever you want, it does seem to be a little bit something that's too flexible or too unfair. But self-regulation as introduced in the Communications and Multimedia Act is a very structured one. There's an industry body that's supposed to self-regulate the content on the network medium. You look at all these laws across in Malaysia, you've got the Penal Code, you've got the Child Act, you've got the Copyright Act, you've got Sedition Act. In every one of these pieces of legislation, there is an element of provisions regarding content. And what we do at the Content Forum is to have one code of reference, the Content Code, that incorporates all of this and refines it even further. I think in the previous panel with, I think Mr. Sharil, they talked about how, definitions of words like grossly offensive or indecent. This is newly introduced in the CMA. What the Content Forum will now have to do is to sit together with the industry, next slide please, to sit down and discuss how this definition should look like. Now this is a snapshot of the members that we have in the Content Forum. As you can see, you've got the main broadcasters, you have the telcos, internet service providers, but we also have civic groups, we have academicians, we have institutions of higher learning, and other associations to make sure there is check and balance. So the industry isn't just making provisions or making regulations in, for the bottom line. There are people in the Content Forum to make sure that the rights of children are protected, the rights of persons with disabilities are protected, and we definitely welcome more people in. Our newest member is TikTok, and we really appreciate that because I think what has been proven by the exercise last year by MCMC and the government is the social media platforms or the OTT platforms, whatever you may call it, needs the basis of legislation to compel them or encourage them to have minimal best standards. The industry will now sit down and formulate and develop this even further and refine it even further. And I think this is how the Communications and Multimedia Act works very well in terms of having self-regulation complement legislation and the government's needs, and at the same time protect community needs as well.
Thank you, Ms. Mediha. Self-regulation, collaborate, and consult, and the regulation will be future-proof. Mr. Siraj, please share your insightful thoughts on the same question.
All right. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and greetings to everyone. Thank you to Mr. Moderator, Mr. Leonard, and then I would appreciate Mrs. Devi and Mrs. Mediha from the point of view given. So from my point of view, I'm currently representing both Communication and Multimedia Consumer Forums of Malaysia and also representing the Malaysia Cyber Consumer Association. This question is very important, but I foresee it back 6 years ago when the Malaysian Cyber Consumer Association start to be in place. We registered through Registrar of Society, and we come out with the term called cyber consumer. For information, during that time, it is very hard for us to explain to the public what is cyber consumer. But nowadays, if you talk about cyber, I believe it becomes most organic understanding amongst of any people around the world. So right now, when pandemic COVID-19, for 2 years, it changed every single aspect of our daily life. 2 years, we live in a house where we believe without internet connectivity, we are very in a bad situation. We order things through e-hailings. We learn about e-hailing during that times. And we learn about cybercrime. And the campaign started massively in that period of time. So today's world, we talk about something that growing fast, especially when terms called AI, being mass adopted in our society, not just Malaysia, but everywhere around the world. And we talk about the policy, how to make sure the consumer well protected in the cyberspace. And like Malaysia, 1st January 2025, actually it's a history of our nation. For the first time, we see the social media being regulated in our country for the first time. And not many countries in the world adapting this regulation into the social media. Malaysia, one of it, Australia, one of it, and I believe some other countries, but not many. So, to see resilience about the policy, I believe the terms of smart regulation must be in place because we live in a smart technology environment. If you talk AI, the growing of technology massive. If people who involved in development, you are developer, you are coders, you engage with GitHub, you will understand how the volunteerism in that platform massively developed. And if we talk about the people who consume it, for example, in the university level, for example, the ChatGPT, massively. If you talk about other applications, also being practiced in, I can say, even in no manner. So, how we can move forward, Mr. Leonard, is to make sure any kind of technology, especially in the cyberspace, being adopted to the mass, to the public. We want to see the regulations always keep aligned out of it. We don't want to see, for example, CMA, Communication and Multimedia Act, was established 1998, and then being mass amended 2024. How many years for it to change? So, what happened to AI adoption for the next 5 years? Are we going to see it remain the same, like today? Or we can foresee it, something that will disrupt the society in the future. So, for me, two major components for this question. First is adaptability. We must have a very smart regulatory framework. And second, the very important part, collaboration with the primary stakeholders and also secondary stakeholders. It's basically all stakeholders related to this regulatory must be always in place, because we don't want to see this regulatory formation from the technology will disrupt the democracy of a nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Siraj. In a way, what you are saying is there must be sufficient measures in place to ensure that frameworks takes the role of smart regulations for cyber consumers. Thank you. Now, thank you, panelists, for your initial thoughts on this broad question of balancing public interest and technological progress. Now, let's delve deep into specific areas of expertise represented by each of our distinguished panelists. Ms. Devi, I have to ask you the first specific question, since you are seated next to me. Ms. Devi, as a head of Regulatory Policy Division at MCMC, you've been at the forefront of developing Malaysia's regulatory framework. What are the key considerations behind Malaysia's decision to introduce a licensing framework for internet messaging and social media providers? And additionally, how does this initiative seek to address the challenges posed by evolving online environment?
Thanks for that question, Leonard. I just would like to share one slide here for everyone.
Yes, we have another slide by Ms. Devi.
Yeah. So basically, when you talked about why did Malaysia decided to have a regulatory framework when you talk about regulating online platform providers, yeah. So basically, if you look at that the slide that I'm sharing up there, there have been numerous reporting with regards to the harm that the society or the public in Malaysia were facing, right? So one of it is, if you look at it, is with regards to online child exploitation, right? Malaysia is not a very big country. Our population is approximately about 33 million plus. And so when we actually did a study, this was a study done by the Ministry of Women and Family and Community Development, yeah, and children's welfare comes under this ministry. So this was a special study commissioned for Malaysia by ECPAT. ECPAT is actually a coming together a group of experts, especially child experts, yeah, and this UNICEF is part of this ECPAT and all that. So this study was done in 2022, but I'm still using this study because this was specifically commissioned for Malaysia. And based on that study, they found that 100,000 children in Malaysia are at risk of online sexual exploitation and manipulation. So to me, for a country of 33 million, 100,000 children being targeted to us is not negotiable. This is something that we need to tackle as a responsible government, as a responsible society. I think the most important thing for a society is we have to make sure our children are safe, right? And as you know, the digital literacy in Malaysia is quite high. For a population of 33, our penetration rate is really high, all right? It's more than, I don't know, almost Haji Bob is here. So I think our internet penetration is about 90 plus, or is it almost 100? 97%, 96%, yeah. So the penetration rate is very high. So our children from a young age, most of them are digital natives, right? So most of them are online. So do you know how this issue of sexual predators, they existed from time immemorial, right? It's not just that suddenly there's so many of them now. They've always been in the picture. But it's just that now the opportunity for them to interact with children has gotten broader, has gotten wider. All right, they have more mediums or platforms to interact with children, to groom children. So we see that as an issue that needs to be tackled at the government level and also as a public level, right? So that's one of the things that we looked at. Another thing we also see, there's a steady increase when it comes to a financial crime, online gambling, financial crime. So there was a report, this is a 2024 report, and again, this is a data specifically on Malaysia. So this is a report done by UNODC, that's the UN Office on Drugs and Crime. So they reported suspicious transaction report, they call it STR. So related to online gambling, nearly doubled between 2019 and 22, reaching over 42,000 cases, yeah. So the transaction actually was valued at 5.5 billion, right? So this is again another worrying trend in Malaysia. And then another main thing we looked at is also like cyberbullying. So cyberbullying shows that 28% of Malaysian children have actually experienced cyberbullying or online violence, right? And even MCMC, we also have received quite a number of reports on cyberbullying. From January 2022 up to July 2024, we received more than 9,000 plus complaints with regards to cyberbullying. So as most Malaysians have seen in the last year, we had cases where victims have actually resorted to committing suicide, right? And one of those cases actually prompted the government to actually amend our penal code to ensure that we have sufficient provisions with regard to cyberbullying to bring the perpetrators to court, yeah? So most of us are aware of those cases. So that's another element that we looked at. And then again, the online fraud, the financial, when I talk about online fraud, this is your love scam, your investment scam and all that. And we also see a rise in these kind of cases, right? Bukit Aman's commercial crime reported online fraud cases doubled from 17,000 plus in 2019 to 34,000 in 2023. So again, you can see everything is on the increase. Nothing is going down. And we foresee this of increasing year by year, right? So when we look at all these things that's happening in our cyberspace, we realize a regulatory intervention is definitely needed and it's timely for us to have that in place. All right? So what we've done is that when we looked at the rise of the online harm, we felt it's essential for us as a responsible regulator and as a responsible government, right? What is the role of a government after all? If it's not to protect its rakyat, right? So we felt that it's timely for us to come out with a regulatory framework, right? And the regulatory framework that we came out with, we did not innovate, we did not come out with a new legislation. We actually used existing legislation, which is the CMA 98, and we actually just did some amendments to existing regulation, the licensing regulation, and the exemption order under the licensing regulation to ensure that certain service providers are brought under our regulatory ambit. So if you look at the regulatory framework that's introduced by the government, by the MCMC, it's a very much based on a risk assessment kind of classification, because you see there are so many platforms out there and not all platforms need to be regulated. So we looked at platforms that has the highest number of Malaysian users in Malaysia, as well as the number of complaints we received. So we had a few thresholds that we looked at. So out of that, there were certain categories of online service providers that would fall within that ambit of regulatory requirement to obtain application service providers class license. So it's not an individual license, it's a class license. So it's still a very much light-handed regulatory approach, but they're still part of our licensees' ecosystem, right? So what do we hope to achieve from this regulatory framework? So basically what we want to do is that, again, we wanted to make sure that we have certain, we can actually issue certain requirements on our licensees, certain expectation from our licensees with regards to how they manage their platform to ensure that their users are safe in using those platforms. And I must emphasize here that Malaysia is not like the only one that is introducing this kind of framework. If you look at we do a global benchmark, many other countries, even in ASEAN region, have taken similar steps to regulate online service providers. For example, Singapore, they designate who is social media providers. Indonesia, through their Peraturan Nombor 5, also regulate in certain way. And then you have your other counterparts in UK, in Australia, in EU, in India, who are all regulating based on their existing framework, yeah? So and the thing is, what we also hope to look into is that as a regulator, we receive a lot of complaints, right? And we actually take it upon ourselves when we receive complaints, we will actually escalate also to the service providers and all that. But the thing is, as a regulator, we felt this responsibility should be shared. It should be a shared responsibility. So it should not be always the regulator telling, take this down, take that down, this is affecting the public, this is affecting the children. Why can't the platform providers also take some steps to protect their users, right? So the thing is, most of these platforms do monetize from their users, right, through their advertising features. There are so many features provided by the service providers. So the thing is, yes, it's free, but it's not really free. You pay in different ways. So there are features to monetize. So the thing is, so why can't you also take some responsibility together with the regulator so that we work hand in hand to ensure the environment, the cyberspace environment is safe for the Malaysian public. So we also wanted to have that situation where we want to share the responsibility with the service providers so that the service providers and us, we can work together to improve ways to make the platform safer, right? And then we also, overall, our main aim was to ensure that the online environment in Malaysia, to a certain extent, is safe. At least there are a number of scam investments, like scam frauds, or offensive content, or content that's harmful for children, is in a way mitigated, right? Of course, you cannot totally eradicate, but at least you must take steps towards reducing it or mitigating it, because to me, that's a good step, the first good step, right? And we also think that through this regulatory, regulatory framework, we can also work more effectively with the service providers, especially when we are investigating a criminal case. Like for example, right, recently I'm sure you all would have read, this was in late December, how we worked together with PDRM on the FIDO groups, right? That is so scary. That's in Malaysia, you know, it's not in Bangkok, it's not in Vietnam, it's not in Cambodia, it's in Malaysia, right? Of course, in that case, I must say the service providers also provided relevant cooperation for us to have a successful operation. But what I mean is that when you have them in our regulatory ambit, it's easier for us to get enforcement assistance, especially when we're investigating criminal matters. So generally, that is the main reason why we introduced this regulatory framework.
Thank you, Ms. Devi. To summarize, the initiative of licensing framework is not only to ensure that the internet is fast and efficient, but also safe and secure for our children, family, and vulnerable groups. Now, my next question is to Ms. Madiha Mahmood. Ms. Madiha, as the CEO of CMCF, you oversee critical efforts in content regulation. You're all about content, online content. Balancing freedom of expression with the obligation to prevent the spread of harmful or misleading content online is a complex challenge. Every time you want to regulate, you hear this word, freedom of expression, freedom of speech. So how does CMCF approach this balance, and what strategies are being implemented to ensure responsible content creation while respecting fundamental freedoms?
Thank you, Leonard. I think on this stage, yourself and Devi would know very much how the debate was between freedom of expression and regulating social media. It was a huge debate when this regulatory framework was being introduced. And I think it's very simple for CMCF. The whole concept is there is no absolute freedom. Freedom of anything ends where harm to others begins. That's essentially it. And the reason why MCMC and the government had to do this regulatory framework, bringing social media platforms onto this ambit, is because of the statistics that Devi just shared. In CMCF, though, we have the content code. That content code is developed with MCMC's, whatever it is that they have come up with in terms of the law or the code of conduct. We then sit with the industry and have it further refined into the content code. The other thing we have is a complaints bureau. This is where anyone, including MCMC, can lodge a complaint about any of our members, about any of the content that they have on the platform. We have had many years of people complaining about TV programs, tons. Now the complaints on TV programs have reduced. You can say maybe the TV stations are behaving themselves, or people are not watching TV, but the fact of the matter is most of the complaints are now coming from the digital platforms. So when we have digital platforms also on board to the Content Forum, they can help us build or develop provisions which are able to accommodate the technology or the innovation, etc., while making sure that freedom of expressions are being protected. I'll give you an example. I think, Leonard, you mentioned misinformation, right? So in the content code, there is a provision against false news. You cannot have anything that's inaccurate, that's misleading, that can lead to national security, public safety harms. Now, one exception to this is if that content is clearly satire or parody. That one is not considered false news, assuming that, of course, it's clearly satire or parody. And I'm happy to see that this provision, which was always in the content code, is now being adopted into the amendments of the CMA. Then people start saying, so any kind of satire and parody should be okay. No. If the satire or parody is defamatory, if it's seditious, if it causes harm to others, that still applies. It's not considered fake news or false content, but it can still be considered harmful or offensive content. So this is the kind of boundaries that we line up in the Content Forum. Similarly, freedom of expression. Children are being used as content quite a lot these days. In the past, you would have children-related programs, then you see child actors. And then slowly you'd see children being used in advertisements. And then we had to have regulations, even in the content code, to make sure that you don't exploit children in advertisements. You can't use children to advertise products for adults, for example. You can't use children in scenes that would be dangerous for children if they imitate it, for example. Now we have harms against children being committed on digital platforms. So at the Content Forum, we need to relook at this again. We need to be adaptive. We need to speak not just to our members, to civil societies, to child rights activists, to child psychologists, to see what else do we need to put into the content code to protect children on the online platform. Like Mr. Siraj was also saying, we need to have the foresight to look at what the challenges are going to be, what the risks are going to be, and it's absolutely, can I use the word insane? It's absolutely insane because there's so many, I think, David, you mentioned it, pockets of communities out there that we need to look at. Special interest groups, from people, from persons with disabilities to migrants, to children, to, race is a huge topic in Malaysia, religion is a huge topic in Malaysia. People bandy about the term 3R, and then some people will say, 3R it's overreached by the government. Some people will say, no, we need it because we need to protect the nation from unrest. Both sides are correct, but where do we draw that line? So what we do at the Content Forum, working with MCMC, working with all the relevant governments, with the organizations, is to find the best way to have these provisions, to protect these communities, to protect our country, while at the same time upholding the Rukun Negara and the constitution of the nation.
In simple words, Ms. Mediha, there's no absolute freedom. And I think Judge Alexander Moraes, in the case of Brazil, an ex, has put it eloquently, where he said, freedom of expression does not mean freedom to commit aggression. Okay. My next specific question is to Mr. Siraj Jalil. Mr. Siraj, as a council member of Consumer Forum Malaysia, CFM, and president of Malaysia Cyber Consumer Association, MCCA, your work is pivotal in advocating for consumer rights in digital landscape. If Ms. Mediha here is all about content, you are all about consumer, and not only any consumer, cyber consumer. Can you share how CFM and MCCA uphold consumer protection in the telecommunication and multimedia industries? And additionally, what are the key activities and plans moving forward to ensure consumer rights are protected across various platforms, including online, direct interfaces, and third-party services?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Leonard. Basically, MCCA, Malaysia Cyber Consumer Association, is a council member to Communication and Multimedia Consumer Forum of Malaysia, CFM. We have been, MCCA been part with CFM since 2019, during that time. So, why CFM is one of the forum that we are interested to take part in? Because cyber definitions, one of the component in that definition, you must put internet connectivity, and then the cyberspace can be created, or you can access to the cyberspace, plus digital gadgets. Digital gadget plus internet connectivity produce cyberspace. Without any single part of it, there is no cyberspace. So, communication and multimedia in Malaysia, MCMC, is the mother of internet. Without MCMC, we don't have the internet in Malaysia. Since 1998, it was created, and then we are here today in 2025. We talk about everything about digital. So younger generation must understand this, because some of the groups, when I ask, where is the internet come from? It become like a big question mark in certain younger generation. They don't know. Is it come from the thin air? Is it come from the earth? Is it out of sudden? Is it the rare earth? Sometimes it's like very simple, like ABC, but very difficult to be justified by one generation. Where is the main problems? Is it we are the one who fail to teach? So in this communication forum, we have two groups. First is demand, where I'm in that side, and there is the supply group. The supply group, most likely from the telecommunication service provider, like we in Malaysia. So this forum very good actually, and should be more understandable by the public in Malaysia. If you have any problem with the telecommunication service provider, any in terms of the internet connectivity, this is the place. And any kind of organization, if you are in the side of demanding something, please take part on this forum. If you are in the corporate, in the industry, try to supplying something to the demand, looking for the consumer, please take part and be in the supply side. So MCCA role is to bring more demand to the supply sides when it comes to the problems produced in that area. For example, cybercrime cannot be created or cannot be performed by the cyber criminals if they don't have any internet connections. How to say cybercrime when there is no internet? So internet must come from either a basic of SIM card, internet connectivity, or maybe house Wi-Fi. But most of it, they are using fake identity, where comes from the simplest way of SIM card. So with the SIM card plus the bank account, where they are looking for people's money. That basic, we talked about it. So with the fake ID from the SIM card, and then they can chip into the cyberspace and looking for victims. So SIM card, who owns the SIM card? Absolutely the telecommunication service provider. So in this forum, MCCA play a role to bring this issue. For example, in Malaysia right now, there's still some irresponsible person selling registered SIM card in online e-commerce platform. You can open your e-commerce platform right now, just type registered SIM card, for example. You can find easily. I don't want to say any brand, but it is reality. We have to see it. It is reality. So registered SIM card easily being used by the hackers, by the cyber troopers. What they are doing? For the hackers, they are trying to hacking people and working together with the scammers and scamming people's money. And they don't want to be detected. And for the cyber troopers, what they do? Spreading misinformation, create negative narrative to targeted victims, including a government, including organization, corporates, and individuals. I am very interested with one research made by the Internet Oxford Internet Institute. Oxford report in 2020, Malaysia included in that report, we are one of the highest using cyber trooper, where Oxford defined it industrialized. Mean the cyber trooper activity, this information is industrialized. Mean people paying it, and it's a good income for them to earn money from cyber trooping. I don't want to see which segment, but it's very sensitive sometimes. It means that the cyber trooper activity comes from a communication baseline with the fake identity from telecommunication, and then they are happily doing a lot of bad things in the cyberspace. And later on, the smart regulatory from our country amend the CMA in a way to find the identity of anonymity in the cyberspace. You know? Okay. So that's a basic understanding about me. I don't want to talk long because we are very short in time.
We are racing against time here. Mr. Siraj. Thank you, Mr. Panelis. We understand you, CFM and MCCA. They play a pivotal role in educating and creating awareness to the internet users about internet usage and the harm that comes with it.